art takes note not merely of form, but also of what lies behind. From the mind of Mahatma Gandhi.
This is an unusual role for Mahatma Gandhi, art critic, but it really is of a piece with the way he sees the world, which is that there are underlying forces and principles that manifest themselves in behavior or on a canvas. So it's that habit of seeing under the surface that we're really hearing here.
Such a beautiful thought. This comes from his tendency to criticize art that was merely ornamental or divorced from life. For him, true art couldn't be about beauty in isolation. It had to reflect the spirit and the deeper reality behind the experiences. Like beyond form, color, technique, these are just the surface. In his mind, true art penetrates to the essence of something. It has to be grounded in reality, an expression of truth. Beauty not just as pure aesthetics, but the reflection of sincerity, morality, and inner life, and integrated with that life. So Gandhi seemed to see art as part of the same current as religion and politics and daily living. They were all rooted in truth, or else they became something hollow. In Taoism, something Lao Tzu might say is, like, beautiful words are not true, and true words are not beautiful. Art that dazzles but lacks spirit is like an empty shell. Even Zhuangzi would praise things that were useless, but had their own inner beauty. And Buddhism and Zen, calligraphy and tea ceremony, for instance, they're not valued for their polish, but for the mental state that it reveals. In calligraphy, the brushstroke clearly shows the spirit behind the hand. So Gandhi here says that true art is more than form, in the same way that a Taoist might say that the form is the vessel and the spirit is the tea inside. You can polish the cup, but if you forget the tea, there's no nourishment there. In qigong, a posture can look perfect, but if it doesn't carry the breath of movement, the intent and the qi flow, it's just a shadow of real practice. The real beauty from art comes when the invisible is made visible.
Man is both matter and spirit, each acting on and affecting the other. From the mind of Mahatma Gandhi.
This is a very scientific approach and not uncharacteristic at all of Gandhi in particular, or the Vedanta, the Hindu background in general. The important part of the statement, perhaps, is the interactivity that it represents. It is such an antidote to the separateness and isolation that many of us feel and that many of us assume is our destiny.
It feels so common that people walk around with this sense of isolation and separateness and this lack of recognition of their place in the world as a part of the whole, an expression of the whole. And I've watched this sense of loneliness fade in the monasteries when people settle into the understanding of their wholeness and their shared aspect of being part of the universe. And I feel as though one of the great sufferings, one of the great tragedies in modern life is this deep sense of isolation, this deep separateness we feel from each other and from the space around us. And there is a very clear way to heal that particular rift, that particular wound. In some ways, it's the original wound, this sense of separateness, this othering of ourselves and others. And there are clear ways to heal it, and I encourage everyone to take the time to find this quality of themselves in the world around them.
I cannot attain freedom by a mechanical refusal to act, but only by intelligent action in a detached manner. Gandhi, Young India, September 17th, 1921.
Again, two criteria that are equally essential. Any kind of insurrectionary or freedom movement should not be a reaction, should not be a mere kind of gut level rejection, but something thought through. The other criterion is even more important and more difficult, and that is to work with detachment, meaning, among other things, that even if something that you try to do has failed, you don't sulk, you don't say this was an utter failure. You just try to learn from it and go on to the next action in your plan.
Such an important piece of training Michael's offering here, that freedom is not a negation of something, but a choice to move forward in freedom, that freedom that comes from inside. And so if you're being forced to react to something, reaction is not response. Reaction is a reflex. It's something bouncing off your trauma, bouncing off the habits that have been handed to you through trauma and violence coming from other places. And instead, if we are given the opportunity inside to pause, to reflect, even if for an instant, then we can respond in a way that reflects our deeper values. And in this case, intelligent action, skilled action, especially if we've been doing training of how to be a good activist, a good peace educator, a nonviolent human, how to skillfully act with compassion, then over time those responses become the instinct, and we become skillful actors in all manner of difficult situations.
Ill-digested principles are, if anything, worse than ill-digested food. Gandhi, from Mahatma, Volume 4.
Using analogies like that is ancient practice in Hinduism, and Gandhi made good use of it. When he says ill-digested principles, I think I'd like to use the term ideologies, mindless ideas that become absolutized, and the actual point of them, which is to contribute to human benefit, is lost. And the results can be devastating, as we've seen only too often in modern history.
I think that's just such a funny way of talking, and I appreciate the sense of humor in this. And like Michael said, I'm assuming it's referencing maybe a well-known phrase in that part of the world or from the Vedantic tradition. And what is badly digested food? It's something that you've taken in, but you have not absorbed. It has not been transformed and become part of you. When you digest something, you break it apart, you assimilate it, and it transforms and becomes your flesh and blood. It becomes who you are. And the same thing when we bring in principles, when we bring in ideas and wisdom, we take them in, and ideally what we do is we digest them. We take them in, we break them down, we make them our own. We assimilate them. They become part of us, not just something that we're swallowing and holding in our mouth or holding in our belly until it passes through in some kind of bulimic learning cycle. But instead, we take in, we digest, we absorb, we transform. The wisdom that we bring in, these good ideas, transform us until we are expressions of wisdom. They're no longer external to us, but they're actually part of what we are.
We have instances in history where terrorism has failed to impose the terrorist's will upon his victim. Gandhi, Young India, June 9, 1920.
Gandhi, of course, had actually two enemies. Actually, he said he had three. The British Empire was one. A more difficult one was the Indian people, particularly that they were either apathetic or tended to burst out in terrorist acts, which was extremely counterproductive. And the third enemy, if you will, that he had to overcome, he said, characteristically, was Mahatma Gandhi.
I appreciate so much Gandhi's sense of humor. And the idea that we can pay attention to the course of history, we can look at violent insurrections, terrorist acts, when people are imposing their will upon the world through violence, we can look to see how successful it was. And very clearly, even if we look to see, oh yes, this person gained the position that they were going for, they became the leader of this country, or they got the money that they were demanding, you look and you see the effect of that upon the people. You can look as well, of course, to see the effect it has upon the person who's doing the violence and that moral injury that's caused, which is becoming a much more well-known fact of life. But also you can look to see the effect it has on the community, the people being robbed, the people being done violence to. And we can look and clearly see this is not the kind of world we want to live in. So clearly it didn't work. Maybe it worked with a small w. It got that person what they wanted, but it didn't work in the sense that it actually made the world a better place. And if, as humans, we want the world to become better for humanity, we have to include all of those pieces and say, gosh, yeah, I can see where this person's coming from. I can see why they felt the need to do this thing. And clearly it did not make things better. Maybe we should try a different way.
Not to think badly of anyone, not to wish ill to him, though we have suffered at his hands, not to hurt him even in thought. This is an uphill task, but therein lies the acid test of nonviolence. Gandhi, Ashram Observances in Action.
I'm so glad he used that understatement, that this is an uphill path. Many of us find it really almost impossible to get terribly far with this challenge. What he said is very useful because it shows that until and unless we can do that, we can't really claim that we've exhausted the possibilities of nonviolence. So because it's so difficult to do, we can easily say that the possibilities of nonviolence may well be endless.
I feel as though, again, it's useful for me to reframe violence as a kind of illness. And when we find ourselves thinking badly of anyone, I can use the word hate. When we hate the people who have injured us, that is a poison to us and to the community. It doesn't accomplish anything worthwhile other than damaging us. And so if we think about nonviolence, the action of nonviolence trying to change the world, even if we think of it selfishly as something for ourselves, we have to stop being violent to ourselves. We have to stop drinking the poison of hatred and anger, self-righteousness, greed. We have to become free of these poisons just to be happy and contented ourselves. And then perhaps we can look around and say, okay, how do I also help other people become free of suffering, to build a better community, to make it safer for all of us? Then maybe we can call that a true acid test for nonviolence.
It is not literacy or learning which makes a man, but education for real life. Gandhi, February 2nd, 1947.
One of the many hugely ambitious projects that Gandhi took up and actually made some progress with was called Nai Talim, or New Education. And it inspired Maria Montessori. It's really part of the inspiring vision that he had of the human being, of human potential, and consequently the yet unexplored capacity of education in the fullest sense of the word to help each and every one of us to realize his or her potential.
And this again is this incredibly practical advice of not leaving education as what my friends might joke as headucation. Do not leave it just in your head. Don't read a book and decide you decided that you have learned something. Instead, begin to apply it in the real world. Explore it in your body, in the space around you, with your community. Make it something real and tangible to you. Not a concept, but an expression of your true being. We consistently come back to this theme with Gandhi of embodying principles, not just enacting them. Become the lesson. Don't just hear the lesson.
Human nature will find itself only when it fully realizes that to be human, it has to cease to be brutal. Gandhi, October 8th, 1938.
We, as animal lovers, have to take this in the right spirit. He didn't mean that animals were, hopelessly behind us in evolution, but he did mean that we have taken a critically important step beyond our nearest animal ancestors in recognizing our unity with one another. And that step will really only be fully realized for the person who has assimilated the vision of nonviolence.
And to recognize this quality of humanness, that part of human nature, is this realization of the opportunity for love and to be compassionate, to extend something consciously outward into the world that makes it better. All of the other animals on the planet, of course, including humans in that circle, all have different capacities and different specialties and ways of seeing the world. I'm certain that as the centuries pass by, we will come to appreciate more and more the capacities that other animals and creatures have that we don't have, their special wisdom that we can learn from. And in the meantime, part of what it means to be human is to expand open the heart, to recognize the possibilities of society and future, and to recreate, to reimagine ourselves and our community and our relationships with the world and other animals. And that opportunity is part of what it means to be human.
I take up my task of leading you in this struggle, not as your commander, not as your controller, but as the humble servant of you all. Gandhi, from Press Report, August 8th, 1942.
Many leaders, especially since Gandhi, have made this claim that they are servants. Servant leadership is a term we hear frequently. But is it really that easy? I mean, if a person is in a position of power, can they really resist the temptation to wield that power to some degree for their own benefit? It takes Mahatma Gandhi to be able to do this to the degree that he did, which means that it is an inspiration for all of us because, as we heard recently, there is nothing beyond the human in what Gandhi achieved. It is only the fullness of human achievement.
And again, the humble quality, the modesty of our leaders is so important. And I feel as though it is especially important to recognize that these positions of great power and wealth, the power and wealth itself can be seen almost like a poison or a toxin. It's really dangerous to a person that prizes peace and balance and wholesomeness. It clearly, consistently seems to damage the people who are in those positions. That whole idea of power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And if you read these tales, the biographies of many of these supposed great people, you can watch them grow perhaps from their humble beginnings and the development into often wonderful people with genuine ideals, and then they're put into these positions where great wealth or great power flows to them, and they slowly become twisted and damaged by that position, by those opportunities, by the pressure. And a lot of very specific things come to mind because this is actually a special interest of mine. It's something that I put energy into learning about. When something becomes greed, when something becomes problematic and damaging for people, there's a kind of tipping point there. And that means that we don't just want to put people in power that have the ability to refrain and to keep themselves safe, like Gandhi clearly did, but we also want to put structures in place where we protect these people who maybe at some point were very worthy of respect and support and looking up to. Maybe these really were great people, and yet we want to support them, recognizing that, okay, here we go. You're now in a position of power. This is going to be really hard on you ethically, morally. This is possibly going to damage you. We need to be extra careful here. What can we do to protect you from yourself? Protect you from money and wealth? Because as funny as it is that everybody seems to want these things, we don't start to recognize that they can be damaging to us. And it's interesting if you talk to any monks in any system, people living a life that is very simple. These are the happiest and most free people in the world. And if you offered them a huge amount of money and power, they may look at you with great horror, recognizing it's like you asking them if they would like to be set on fire. And how do we protect the leaders that move into these positions? And how do we find people who are able to protect themselves from being corrupted? And Gandhi, again, is such a wonderful, amazing example of this. So inspiring.
I must strive my utmost during the coming year of grace to express in every little act of mine whatever love I am capable of. Gandhi, Young India, October 23, 1924.
Concretely, Gandhi is referring to the fact that he was released from prison, and he didn't always rely on it that he would stay out of prison. That's why he called it a year of grace. Also, things were going very well. Satyagraha was picking up, and underneath it, again, always looking to that underlying principle, he's looking to how he can engage the tremendous love of which he was capable in this situation. Actually, there was no situation in which he could not engage it, but it looked like it would be particularly visibly effective in those days.
To recognize that because of his path, he is likely to go right back into jail. And to not be afraid of it, instead to see his time of relative freedom as a year of grace, and to fill every moment with acts of love and to love the people around him. I just feel that this is worthy of pausing and recognizing that instead of coming out of prison and looking around and saying, okay, that's it, I've had enough, he looks at the blue sky and says, okay, I'm going to take advantage of this time because it's likely I'm going to go back. And he did. May we all, as activists and change makers, have that level of courage.
Patience and perseverance, if we have them, overcome mountains of difficulties. Gandhi, May 16, 1935.
As Saint Teresa of Avila said, La paciencia todo lo alcanza. Patience can achieve everything. This is an act of real maturity to be able to see this. And if you may remember in the film, someone called him the hero of Champaran, and he said, no, the stubborn man of Champaran. He had complete faith that if you cling to the truth, it could only lead to success. And he said that several times. And that, in fact, is what satyagraha literally means, clinging to truth.
This faith that Gandhi develops in this movement, the satyagraha, the ahimsa, the movement of love and how it changes the world. And to have respect enough and belief enough in that movement of love through you and into your community to just keep walking forward because you know it's making a difference, even if it isn't obvious right at the time. To be patient and to continue persevering and just to continue putting one foot in front of the other, being practical and present and loving and compassionate, and to watch yourself overcome mountains of difficulties without ever trying to alter your course, to listening to that still small voice and moving forward with your community. Again, very inspiring. And I recommend to everybody to take the time to prove to themselves that these methods make a difference, at least directly in your own life, because we can start to develop that sense of faith, that quality of respect and belief in this method, so that we're not constantly questioning ourselves and needing to reevaluate every time that we have a setback, but instead we simply get back on our feet, we reevaluate, we look at the blue sky and we say, okay, let's keep going.
The real rulers are the toiling millions. Gandhi, June 15, 1947.
What we can partly see in this is a great act of humility, or an act of great humility. He was always trying to prevent the headiness and egotism that comes from any kind of a position of advantage. But he may have meant something more significant even than that, meaning that what he was doing was for the toiling masses. And in contrast to the way that Marxians went about it, he really laid down a historical precedent of a new and potentially very, very illuminating kind.
and to recognize that, again, you are the representative, the caretaker. You are the representative of millions of people who care for you and look out for their families and who are attempting to grow the same community that you're part of, and to allow that to be your guiding light rather than your ego or what you think that you want or need. So instead of moving forward based on your own desires, you allow the true ruler of your heart, the guide of your motivations, to be the people that you represent, this large family that you've connected with, and then to set aside your own sense of ambition. You're not saying, oh, it's me in charge. Instead, it's saying, it's you, it's we in charge. And I'm going to do whatever it is that's best for all of us, as best as I can.
The clearest possible definition of the goal and its appreciation would fail to take us there if we do not know and utilize the means of achieving it. Gandhi, September 17, 1933.
This is simply a more analytical way of saying that means and ends are interconvertible, and that in the long term, there's no such thing as achieving a positive end with destructive means. The character of the means, as to whether they are violent or nonviolent, whether they are hateful or loving, will determine the outcome if we know where to look.
And to me, it also references that there are very specific methods and steps for healing and to work toward nonviolent action and peaceful revolution and transformation in our communities. There's some wonderful books by a famous author named Gene Sharp. And he has entire books of just lists of peaceful nonviolent action that is incredibly effective, and when to apply them, when not to apply them. Michael Nagler is a scholar of such things, and he will tell you, this is a nonviolent action, but it's not effective. It actually gets in your own way. Instead, try this. And to recognize that we want to make certain that our principles and our methods are the same. We want to always be acting out of compassion and love and avoiding creating violent systems and ripples and effects in our world because they come back to haunt us. But also to recognize that there are means of achieving the ends. And because it's a science, we know, okay, this hasn't really worked in the past, but you know what really has worked? Try this method. And we don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. There are scholars of this skill and method. And by taking the time to study with them, like Gandhi, like Michael Nagler, as I'm doing right now, we can continue moving forward and allowing this movement to grow and to be more and more skillful every generation. It's possible. Let's keep moving forward together. We can do it.
Their partiality for their own standpoint came in the way of their giving due weight to the arguments of their opponents. Gandhi, Ashram Observances in Action.
Without knowing which particular struggle he's referring to, he is obliquely referring to his incredible capacity to see the real needs of whoever was in opposition to him, and that being able to actually almost, shall we say, become them, step into their shoes, see the way the world looked to them, almost always enabled him to give them what they really needed, which was not in conflict with what he really needed. It's only on the level of wants that we have conflicts. Apparent conflicts can always be resolved if we become aware of our real needs, and by extension, those of others we're working with.
And if I may again point people toward the work of Marshall Rosenberg, nonviolent communication methods, and the method itself has evolved quite a lot over the decades, and it is a powerful tool for learning to reframe conversations and negotiations and connections with people in our own lives and at larger levels. And a lot of that is, as Michael was saying, learning to recognize the actual needs in the situation and responding to those rather than the wants and the things that we're talking about, externality. That's always where the conflict is. We start arguing over wants. But when we can begin to identify our actual need, our values, connection happens really easily because we're all human. We're all working for the same things. And then we start to see each other's humanness. We start to relate to each other on that new level. And it becomes very easy to heal any situation and grow from it because now we're relating to each other in a space that is healing by its nature, because that's how humans are. And so if we can find that deeper level of needs and values and the humane expressions, rather than the noise that we're talking to each other, expressing our wants and our attachments and the complexities of our past, we sink a little bit deeper into a larger sphere, we connect, and then healing can occur during discussion. And certainly at the level that Gandhi is working, the rooms that he was in having these conversations, I cannot imagine that would be easy. And Marshall Rosenberg himself is in the table with some incredibly important negotiations to stop wars, to heal major rifts between people, to end bloodshed. And he has some amazing stories of how that healing can progress as long as we can really connect to each other.
In my opinion, Rama, Rahman, Ahura Mazda, God, or Krishna are all attempts on the part of man to name that invisible force which is the greatest of all forces. Gandhi, August 18th, 1946.
It is just wonderful to think how much suffering and alienation and hatred could be spared if we had this vision of his, and not only of his, but of other persons. But it requires a depth of understanding, both of humanity and, as he puts it, that soul force which has given rise to all reality. As he said elsewhere, all religions have been given by God, but they have been received by man. And it's on the receiving end that the differences loom so large and propel us into hostilities.
And it's particularly shocking to recognize how much blood has been spilled in the name of all loving gods of different names. Another very human issue that pops up. And not being a religious person myself, my experience of what people call Rama, God, Krishna, this is, as Gandhi says, it's the way that we relate to this clearly experienceable force in the world, the beingness of the world, the suchness of it, the qualities that flow through our lives, these grand, vast experiences, we give it a name. That's a wonderful thing to do. I can use the name Tao, and it doesn't matter what we call it. But by relating through to those deeper qualities, I feel like it can be very, very helpful. For instance, if I have a statue of a mother figure, like Guan Yin or the Dipper Mother, and I say, okay, this being is one of pure love and compassion. That's the expression of their nature. And sometimes if I am stuck in a place that's filled with hatred and bitterness, and I can't find love and compassion in myself, but what I can do is I can imagine that this being in front of me, this painting or this statue, this symbol, radiates that pure love and compassion. And when I connect to that figure on the table, on the altar, I can find a little bit of that resonance inside me. That being radiates pure love and compassion, and somehow there's a little echo inside me, and I can feel it. Maybe it brings me to tears. And over time, by relating consistently, by resonating with that one note from the altar, I begin to find it more and more easily inside myself. And pretty soon I become an expression of that love and compassion. I find it inside myself more and more easily. And I think that is a beautiful process. And because of that, I recommend that people have an altar and have something on your altar that allows you to find these deeper and better qualities in your nature. And you resonate with them until you become the embodiment of those qualities yourself.
God is not a power residing in the clouds. God is an unseen power residing within us, and nearer to us than fingernails to the flesh. Gandhi, truth is God.
Again, he is pointing out the difference between what sectarian religions that often have a mythology which then gets taken literally and makes the really tragic mistake of locating God, who is really the inner life spirit within us, the spark of our own consciousness, as something far away. And that immediately degenerates into divisions between groups that characterize that divine spirit differently and locate it differently.
Yeah, and again, this willingness to talk about what we call God, which is experienced differently in every culture by every single person. And yet the experience of this divine quality, this overwhelming, expansive quality of beingness, whatever name we give to it, even just that which is resting around and behind consciousness itself, the beauty of nature. Every person has this experience, and we just call it something different. And the people who spend their time dwelling with that, we call them mystics or weirdos. I've been called both. And we allow ourselves to deeply imbibe of that particular space, that resonance, that quality, that realm, until it becomes part of our nature more deeply. It guides and transforms us from the inside. And that's why he's saying here, it's nearer to us than the fingernails to the flesh. It's closer to us than our own body, which sounds funny until you recognize what we're talking about. It's far simpler than any idea. We speak about it with words and poetry, but of course, words and poetry are ideas. And you can't see it, but you can be it. And it's a wonderful thing to look for. Even better defined.
Whoever tries to serve his private ends without serving others harms himself as well as the world at large. The reason is obvious. Gandhi, Ashram Observances in Action.
Okay, I don't know how obvious it will be to all of us, but it is perfectly obvious to one who sees the inner unity, not only of humanity, but of all life. And I like to add, who sees the purposefulness and the positive, actually beauteous nature of reality, that nothing in life is a mistake. Apparent differences are there for us to regain our unity and to represent the infinite diversity of God.
It's interesting diving into the spirituality of Gandhi. But I feel like, again, this is part of the discussion of what happens to people when they gain power. Whenever we're doing something in a self-serving way, we're just feeding ourselves, taking from others without any awareness of the context of the space around us and the world at large. When we think I can take something from somebody else and make them poorer and make me richer, and I think that that's a good thing, we are harming everybody around us. If we're not able to find a situation that's win-win, where everybody is better, then in reality, everything is a little bit worse, a little bit poorer, which is why there's this continual degradation of, for instance, the environment. We continually take from it as though it's this endless source of material for us. And of course, it gets weaker and weaker and weaker because we're never giving anything back. We have to learn how to make everything healthier. If I work in my garden, I like to talk about my garden, I can farm the soil, I can heal the soil, actually make the topsoil richer while I have crops growing from it. But if you go to a monocropping facility, every year when they take the crops out, the soil dies. And they have to sort of revive it, and it looks like concrete. But instead, you can farm and garden in such a way where the whole space gets richer and healthier without strip mining it for your food and for your materials. And how much more so in relationships. If I'm in a relationship where I'm just taking from somebody in any context, and I don't care what's happening to them because I'm getting what I want, how can I think that that's anything but harmful to everybody involved, especially me, because then I'm now involved in this tragedy. And that becomes part of me. That becomes my living. That becomes what I'm looking for in the world. And that is probably more damaging to me than anybody else. So we have to learn how to see the whole and to work not for our own private ends, but for the world at large. And yeah, the reason's obvious.
It is to me a matter of perennial satisfaction that I retain generally the affection and trust of those whose principles and policies I oppose. Gandhi, Young India, March 17, 1927.
Now, this was not 100% true all the time because there were those who could not see the unity that he's referring to, but at least in his own heart, no one was an enemy. All were human together. And because he not just saw that, but lived in it, but experienced it in the very depths of his being, he was able to carry that vision into the minds and hearts of others. And that's where his great power lay.
And we hear these stories of Gandhi's life where after his death, all of these people who were supposedly his opponents all of his life, they came forward and had the most wonderful things to say about him. How do you leave a conflict like that where you're throwing out an entire imperial force, and in the end, the people who were your greatest opponents write wonderful things about you? Can you imagine that happening today? And I feel like that is the highest level of skill. In the martial arts, our own Grandmaster Feng Zhiqiang, he made a statement where he said, if you're in a fight and you have to hurt the other person to protect yourself, then you're not skillful enough yet. Ideally, you're in the fight and you actually heal them and the situation while you're defending yourself. That's the highest form of skill. Not just to get out of it, certainly not to hurt them, this person that's attacking you, but if possible, to befriend them and heal the situation on the way. And he actually has several examples of that, which is mind-blowing. Can you imagine being attacked and then healing the situation afterwards? I have a bunch of examples of that from people that I know. And that is a very high level of gongfu, we might say, in the martial arts.
There is no time limit for a satyagrahi, nor is there a limit to his capacity for suffering. Hence, there is no such thing as a defeat in satyagraha. That's Gandhi from the Satyagraha Leaflets, number 14, May 4th, 1919.
It's said in the spiritual tradition that hurry or impatience is actually a form of violence. So it follows inevitably that a true satyagrahi will not be impatient. Another reason for this is that she or he will have such total confidence that in the long run, the satyagraha, the nonviolence, has to succeed. That's just the fabric of the universe. We may not see the results that we want in our time, but they are going to be there, and that makes us confident that we are doing the right thing.
And recognizing that rushing around as a kind of violence is a very useful thing. From the medical perspective, rushing around is a waste of your qi. It is exhausting in its nature. And just in the same way that if you go out for a walk and there's a certain pace for everybody, if you walk with a group of people, you all discover this, that everybody wants to walk at a different pace. Because the one person who is strolling that can find their perfect groove, their golden stride, where they could walk like that all day, not break a sweat, walk up and down hills, they're completely fine. And yet they walk with a friend who walks a little bit faster, just a tiny bit faster. And now they've lost that stride. And now they become exhausted after 10 minutes. And it's a very common thing that I see when I'm working with people doing personal training or teaching other physical methods like Tai Chi walking, meditation walking. There's an ability to listen to ourselves that has to be developed so that we can find what is working for us, the pace, in this case, the walking speed that works, where suddenly we find ourselves going, oh yeah, this is now effortless. I could do this all day. And in fact, might feel more rested, more energized after this walk because of that. But if I push myself a little bit too hard, or indeed even walk a little bit too slow, I might become exhausted and I feel worse afterward. But the first skill is the ability to listen to ourselves, to our condition, to that state of balance, to be able to find and nurture that pace in this case. But it's the same thing with everything. We have to be able to listen to that space inside us in order to recognize what we need in the moment. So we don't rush, we don't hurry, certainly, but we do everything in that quiet golden space where everything is nourishing and healing, this warm yang that I talk about elsewhere, this warm nourishing quality where you're moving through your life being loving and compassionate, and that circle of compassion has to extend to yourself. Otherwise, you are expending all of your energy, and you can only keep that up for so long. And now the movement, the healing movement in the world has lost you because you used up all your chi. You are too important for that. So make sure that you cultivate yourself so that you are rested and ready for the movement, ready to be part of the healing work that needs to happen.
If we all discharge our duties, rights will not be far to seek. If, leaving duties unperformed, we run after rights, they will escape us like a will-o'-the-wisp. Gandhi, Young India, January 8th, 1925.
This is one of Gandhi's main points, which really helps to reorient us. Part of the question, which he doesn't address here directly, is that when we're asking for rights, we're thinking about me, I've got to get mine. When we're thinking about duties, we're thinking about our responsibility and our relationship to others. So there's far less violence in that second paradigm that he outlines here. And Gandhi isn't the only one to say this. A philosopher that we like very much, Mary Midgley, has really a lot to say about how harmful it is to be focusing on rights.
And it's always about widening our circle of awareness, our circle of compassion, so that we're not centering ourselves in any discussion of peace, but rather we are opening it up to the larger needs of the people and the community. And not only is it more useful because it allows us to have a broader view and allows the movement to go through towards something more important than just what I want right now, but it's also more satisfying because we're now being in service rather than chasing our desires, which always leads to some sort of interpersonal suffering.
I do not believe that the Gita teaches violence for doing good. It is preeminently a description of the duel that goes on in our own hearts. Gandhi, August 24th, 1934.
Gandhi is here correcting a misunderstanding about a very important text, the Bhagavad Gita, which does indeed describe a war. My own theory as a bit of a literary scholar is that that was the only framework on which a metaphor could be appreciated and understood. But by the time you finish reading chapter 2, in my experience, it's perfectly obvious that, as Gandhi says, we're talking about the struggle that goes on within a human being, not the violence that occurs between human beings.
There's a wonderful book for those of you who are interested in the Bhagavad Gita by a translation and commentary by Yogananda, Paramahansa Yogananda. And he goes through line by line helping us to see that there is a context of a war. Someone's being forced to fight a war against their neighbors and their family. And this Prince Arjuna, who's the main character that we're following around, he represents us in some way. He's forced to kill the people that he loves. And there's a discussion about it. And on the surface, it can be rather horrifying. And the first time I read it, I was rather horrified by this violence and this context. And, oh, how barbaric. Why are we talking about this? But of course, like with so many things, I lacked the understanding and the context of what was trying to be taught. And in Yogananda's book, his take on it, as he takes you through line by line, he's saying, no, this represents this. This is a direct description of this in Indian culture, or this Hindu deity, or this perspective, which of course I wouldn't have understood otherwise. And there's so much beauty in it that as a meditator, for instance, when you are coming up against your own pride and your desire to accomplish something, how do I defeat that pride? And there's a character in there that represents that quality. And so as a meditator, how do you overcome that? Through trickery, through understanding, through leading, through following, through letting Krishna do it for you. And it's almost a description of meditative techniques, and I found it really enlightening and helpful to help me understand the perspective of this Bhagavad Gita book, which is incredibly important, always worth reading for everybody who just wants to have a literary understanding of the world. And it's funny because in Taoist practice, many people might know the Monkey King book, The Journey to the West. And there's constant battles in there as well, and all kinds of battles. And if you read the book, not the shortened version that's often in translation to English, but rather the original Chinese, there's just battle after battle with random demons that have different kinds of faces and different kinds of predilections and weird habits. And they have certain weapons, and you have to defeat them in a certain way, otherwise it doesn't work. And it's this Taoist expression of the same thing, that during meditation, during cultivation, we face certain difficulties, certain demons need to be overcome. Are they overcome with our will, with our intellect, by doing a certain kind of practice? Oh, I need this tool that can only be gained by doing this cultivation method. Oh, I have to ask for help from this character, through patience, through running away. And with a guide, in this case, I'm lucky enough to have Master Zhicheng, he takes you through and says, oh no, this is a description of this quality, and this is the practice. And so clearly the person that wrote it, or was one of the latest people who rewrote it, had a great understanding of Taoist methodology and internal alchemical practice. And so, in any case, this is Gandhi saying that he understood this about the great work that his culture was prizing and defending it against the people who misunderstand it at the lowest level.